The Council's emergency session. The Grand Citadel of the Galactic Accord had witnessed 10,000 years of interstellar diplomacy. Its crystalline spires stretched 40 kilometers into the violet atmosphere of Velarath Prime, a neutral world that belonged to no species and every species simultaneously. Inside its central chamber, the Helix Hall, representatives of over 300 civilizations sat in concentric rings of floating seats, each tier glowing with the bioluminescent color of their respective homeworld. Tonight, the hall was not glowing with ceremony. It was pulsing with fear. Ambassador Sirith of the Calvari, a species of 8-limbed cephalopods whose skin shifted colors to match their emotions, had gone from calm azure to deep crimson in the span of a single transmission. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed it clearly: a fleet. Not just any fleet. The Vreth Dominion. A civilization so ancient and so brutal that most galactic historians referred to their conquests only in past tense, as if even writing about them in present tense was too terrifying to consider. "They have breached the outer veil," said High Arbiter the Los Vereen, a Sarthi elder whose elongated silver form hovered above the central podium. His voice was synthesized through translation matrices, but the weight behind it needed no translation. "The Vreth have not entered this region of the galaxy in 4,000 standard cycles. Their return means one thing: consumption." The Vreth did not negotiate. They did not colonize in the traditional sense. They consumed. Every biological resource, every technological artifact, every atmosphere capable of sustaining life, they processed it. They had destroyed 11 civilizations in their last campaign. 11 worlds gone. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Erased. "What is the status of the Accord's combined defensive force?" asked Ambassador Pira Deline of the Eutheri, tall, silver-skinned bipeds known for their military precision and cool logical minds. High Arbiter Vereen's expression shifted, a rare display of genuine distress. "Insufficient. Our projections indicate a 43% chance of holding the outer perimeter. For more than 30 days, that probability drops to 11%. Silence fell across the Helix Hall. 300 civilizations, each representing worlds of billions, sat quietly in the face of 11%. Then from the far tier, the newest, smallest delegation, a hand rose. It was pink. 5-fingered. Unmistakably human. "We'll fight," said Fleet Liaison Commander Yara Osei of the Terran Interstellar Directorate. She didn't stand dramatically. She didn't make a speech. She simply said it the way humans said most important things, plainly, like it was obvious. Ambassador Sirith's skin flickered from crimson to a confused amber. "Commander Osei, humanity has been a member of the Accord for only 62 cycles. Your military infrastructure, while notably aggressive by development curve standards, is not considered a Tier 1 combat force by Accord classification." Yara nodded. "I know. We're Tier 3. We're also volunteering to lead the advance column." Another silence. This one different from the first. This one was confusion layered over something older and harder to name, the first stirring of something the galaxy hadn't felt in a very long time. "Oh." High Arbiter Vereen tilted his long head. "You understand what leading the advance column means? You would absorb the first wave of Vreth contact. Casualty projections for that position are..." He paused. "Significant." "How significant?" Yara asked. 60 to 90%. Yara Osei looked at the holographic display of the incoming Vreth fleet, thousands of dark angular ships that moved in organic patterns, like a swarm with one terrible mind. She studied it for 4 full seconds. Then she looked back at High Arbiter Vereen. "We've had worse odds," she said. "Send us the coordinates." The Iron Covenant. The Terran interstellar ship Unbroken was not the largest vessel in the Accord's hastily assembled defensive coalition. The Sarthi contributed 3 dreadnoughts the size of small moons. The Eutheri brought 17 precision strike carriers, each capable of folding space in controlled microbursts. Even the pacifist Lorith, who had never fought in their recorded history, contributed 16 automated defense platforms. The Unbroken was, by comparison, a mid-sized battle cruiser. 1.2 kilometers of titanium ceramic composite hull, electromagnetic rail batteries along its spine, and a crew of 4,216 humans who had been briefed exactly 48 hours ago that they were heading to meet a force that had ended 11 civilizations. The ship's observation deck was packed. Crew members stood shoulder to shoulder, watching through the transparent alloy viewport as the coalition fleet assembled in the darkness of the Caloris Drift, a vast, quiet region of space where the stars were sparse and the shadows were deep. Chief Engineer Damaris Reyes floated in the zero-gravity maintenance bay above the antimatter containment core, running her 7th diagnostic in 6 hours. Beside her, a Sarthi technical observer named Elanthos watched with barely concealed bewilderment. "You've run the diagnostic 7 times, Elanthos said. "The system reads nominal." "7th time's the charm," Damaris said without looking up. "That phrase makes no mathematical sense. Neither does charging into a 60% casualty scenario, but here we are." She finished her check, tapped a final confirmation into her haptic interface, and finally looked at Elanthos. "I run the diagnostic until I understand the machine completely. Until I know every possible failure point. Then when something breaks in combat, and something always breaks, I already know how to fix it." Elanthos regarded her. "This is a human methodology?" "This is my methodology. Humans have about 8 billion methodologies." She pushed off the railing and floated toward the exit hatch. "Come on." Commander Osei's briefing in 10. In the main tactical room, Yara Osei stood before a 3-dimensional rendering of the Vreth Advance Fleet. The room held the ship's senior staff, plus liaison officers from 14 allied species, a small, tense gathering of beings who breathed different atmospheric mixes, processed information at different speeds, and had wildly different biological responses to stress. Humans, Yara had been told by a U3 psychologist years ago, had one of the most unusual stress response profiles in the known galaxy. Where most species experiencing existential threat either froze, fled, or collapsed into collective paralysis, humans did something that defied evolutionary logic. They got focused. Not all of them. Not always. But enough of them, often enough, that it had shaped their entire civilization. "Here's what we know," Yara said, using a light pointer to trace the Vreth formation. "The Vreth Advance Guard moves in a crescent pattern. They push the center hard to break formation, then sweep the flanks. Every civilization they've encountered has tried to match that formation. They all failed." She paused. "We're not going to match their formation." "What will we do instead?" asked Liaison Commander Vreth, a U3 officer who immediately winced at sharing a name with the enemy. "Strategically mirroring. We're going to do what humans do when someone tries to push through our center," Yara said. She zoomed in on the Vreth crescent. "We let them." Silence. "We open the center deliberately. Make it look like a gap. When they commit to the push, their crescent collapses inward. Their flanks overextend. That's when the Sarthi dreadnoughts come in from above the orbital plane, and the U3 fold behind them." She looked around the room. "We're the bait. We hold the center long enough for everyone else to close the trap." Elanthos of the Sarthi leaned forward. "And if you cannot hold long enough?" Yara Osei smiled, not the smile of someone who didn't understand the risk. The smile of someone who had already made peace with it. "Then we hold longer," she said. First contact. The Vreth arrived without warning, which was itself a kind of warning, because everything humanity had learned about the Vreth said they never announced themselves. They simply appeared, the way a predator appears not at the edge of the clearing, but already in the center of it. 843 Vreth vessels dropped out of whatever method of travel they used, not faster than light in any conventional sense, but something that left gravitational echoes so severe that every ship in the coalition felt their hulls flex when the Vreth fleet materialized. 14 liaison officers from allied species reported immediate elevated stress responses. 3 experienced involuntary biological shutdowns, temporary, survivable but debilitating. On the bridge of the Unbroken, every human felt their stomach drop. Then they got to work. Railgun batteries 1 through 12, full charge, called Weapons Officer Lieutenant Commander Pyotr Vasek, his voice completely level. "Targeting solution for leading Vreth elements. Don't wait for them to get comfortable." "Electromagnetic countermeasures active," responded Defense Tech Ensign Amina Traore. "They're jamming across 17 frequency bands. I'm seeing their pattern, cycling every 4.2 seconds. Her fingers moved. "Got it? We're punching through." The first volley from the Unbroken struck the lead Vreth vessel before the aliens had fully oriented themselves. It wasn't a killing blow. The Vreth ships were massive organic-mechanical hybrids that could absorb enormous damage, but it was a statement. "We see you. We are not afraid." The Vreth responded the way all things respond when struck unexpectedly, with total, overwhelming force. Over 300 vessels redirected toward the Unbroken and its human escort wing of 22 ships. "They're focusing on us," reported Navigation Officer Kenji Mori. "Confirmed. We have primary targeting by approximately 40% of their visible fleet." "Good," said Yara Osei. That means they're ignoring the Sarthi positioning on the orbital plane. It also means we're about to be hit by 40% of their visible fleet, Kenji said. One problem at a time, Lieutenant. What followed was 11 minutes that would later be studied at military academies across 47 civilizations. The human wing, 23 ships against over 300 Vreth vessels, did not attempt to survive through positioning alone. They fought with something that observers from allied species would struggle to categorize in their after-action reports. The closest word in Sarthi was Zelver, roughly translated as deliberate disregard for self-preservation in service of a collective goal. The Uthari called it Krethsor, sacrificial momentum. In English it was simply called covering fire or buying time, or most accurately just doing what needed to be done. 17 human ships took catastrophic damage in those 11 minutes. 4 were destroyed completely. 1,244 crew members were killed. The Unbroken herself absorbed 16 direct Vreth energy strikes, lost her port rail battery array, lost decks 7 through 11 to catastrophic decompression, and kept fighting. And in those 11 minutes, High Marshal Darren of the Sarthi moved 3 dreadnoughts into position above the orbital plane. U3 full drives charged. The trap closed. When the Vreth crescent collapsed inward as Yara had predicted, when their flanks overextended and their formation buckled, the Sarthi dreadnoughts fell upon them like moons falling into gravity wells. The U3 appeared behind the crescent's tail, cutting off retreat. In 44 minutes, the Vreth advance guard was destroyed. On the bridge of the Unbroken, someone started clapping. Someone else joined. Within 30 seconds, every human on that bridge was cheering, loud, messy, irreverent, completely inappropriate for a military command environment. Yara Osei let it happen for exactly 10 seconds. "All right," she said, and the room went quiet. "Damage reports. Medical status." Then we prepped for the second wave. There was always a second wave. The weight of the galaxy. The medical bay of the Unbroken smelled like antiseptic, recycled air, and something organic that the ship's medics had given up trying to fully filter out. It was overfull. Every bed occupied. Overflow patients on temporary cots in adjacent corridors. Dr. Layla Marchetti hadn't slept in 40 hours and was operating on stimulants, field-grade pain management, and something she privately categorized as righteous stubbornness. Alanthos, the Sarthi technical observer, found her in the middle of a surgery, a chest reconstruction for a gunner whose station had been breached by a Vreth energy lance. The Sarthi watched through the observation glass, unable to enter without a pressure suit adaptation, and simply observed. He had been observing humans for 62 cycles, the entirety of their Accord membership. He had written 12 academic papers on their psychological profiles. He had been considered one of the foremost Sarthi authorities on Terran culture. He was beginning to think he had understood almost nothing. After the surgery, Dr. Marchetti found him in the corridor. She was pulling off her gloves, her eyes circled dark with exhaustion, her hands shaking slightly from stimulant saturation. "He'll live," she said. She didn't wait to be asked. "I was not expecting you to perform the surgery yourself," Alanthos said. "You are the chief medical officer." "Surely. My best surgical resident is in bed 3. 2 of my senior staff are in bed 7 and bed 12. She threw the gloves in a recycler. "When there's no one else, you do it yourself." Alanthos was quiet for a moment. Among the Sarthi, when casualties reach a certain threshold, command protocol dictates redeployment of specialist personnel to secondary positions. The logic is preservation of high-value assets. Layla looked at him. Not angrily. Just directly. "What's the threshold?" 30% specialist loss triggers mandatory reassignment. We're at 61% specialist loss across the medical team. She leaned against the wall. "Our threshold is different." "What is your threshold?" She thought about it. Genuinely considered it. "When there's literally no one left," she said. "That's when we stop." Alanthos processed this. His silver form was still, which among Sarthi indicated deep cognitive engagement. This is not logical from a resource conservation standpoint. "No," Layla agreed. "But it means that every crew member on this ship knows in their bones, that as long as any of us are standing, we will not be abandoned. That knowledge changes how people fight. How people endure." She straightened up. "That's not illogical. That's the whole strategy." Elsewhere on the ship, in the makeshift operations room that had been set up because the main tactical room was undergoing emergency structural repairs, Commander Yara Osei was on a communication channel with High Marshal Darren of the Sarthi. "The Vreth second wave is larger than anticipated," Darren said. His image flickered, The damage to the Unbroken's communication array made stable transmission difficult. Our projections now show. I've seen the projections, Yara said. Then you understand the coalition is recommending a strategic withdrawal to regroup at. I understand the recommendation. Yara pulled up the tactical display. The second breath wave was enormous. 3 times the size of the first. They moved differently too, slower, more deliberate. They had observed the first engagement. They were adapting. Commander Osei, the Unbroken is not in condition to. The Unbroken is in whatever condition I say it's in, High Marshal. She wasn't being rude. She was being precise. We have 17 functional rail batteries. We have our full jump engines. We have 4,000 people who are angry and not finished. She looked at the display. I'm not asking to hold the line alone. I'm asking for 48 hours before withdrawal. Enough time to get our wounded to secondary support ships and enough time for, she paused. An idea. Darren's expression, difficult to read for humans, but Yara had spent years studying Sarthi body language, shifted into something she had never seen from him before. He was a being who had commanded forces for 300 years. He had seen much. What idea? He asked. The Vreth are adapting to our tactics, Yara said. Which means they're learning. Which means they're predictable. She zoomed in on the movement pattern of the second wave. Every time they've entered a new engagement in recorded history, they've adapted to the last thing that hurt them. The crescent failed because we opened our center. So now, she traced their new formation. They're coming in a sphere. Total enclosure. Nothing gets out. Yes. Which makes withdrawal the rational. Unless, Yara interrupted, we don't try to get out. She turned to face the display fully. High Marshal. What happens to a sphere formation when the thing inside it doesn't run? Silence on the channel. A sphere is designed for containment, Yara said. It's not optimized for internal assault. Its weakest points are its poles, top and bottom of the sphere's axis. If we hold position at the center, force them to fully commit the sphere, and then hit both poles simultaneously with everything. Darren was silent for a long moment. Among the Sarthi, long silences were how they processed extraordinary proposals. You are describing, he said finally, allowing yourselves to be completely surrounded by a force 3 times the size that nearly destroyed you, and then attacking from the inside. Yes. Another pause. This is either, Darren said slowly, the most tactically insane proposal I have encountered in 3 centuries of command or, he paused, the most human. Yara smiled. Those aren't mutually exclusive. The galaxy's most prestigious honor. The Helix Hall had been decorated before. Civilizations had been welcomed here, treaties had been signed, historic moments had been recorded in its crystalline archives for 10,000 years. But no one alive in the hall today had ever seen it decorated quite like this. The banners of 300 civilizations hung in concentric rings from the vaulted ceiling, a visual representation of the Accord itself. At the center of the hall, where the holographic display usually projected strategic assessments and crisis data, there was simply a stage. Simple. Circular. Lit from below with warm white light that the Sarthi had specifically requested be calibrated to human visual comfort. Every seat in the hall was occupied. Species that rarely attended in-person sessions had sent physical representatives. Some in environmental suits, some in pressurized containers, some via hard-light avatar because travel was impossible. Over 1 billion beings across the galaxy were watching via transmission relay. Commander Yara Osei stood on the stage in her dress uniform, dark blue, white accents, the small silver pin of the Terran Interstellar Directorate at her collar. She stood next to 12 other humans, her surviving senior officers. Some were in wheelchairs. Some bore visible reconstruction work from trauma treatment. 2 wore full exoskeletal support frames while their bones finished regenerating. They stood anyway. Behind them, projected in holographic memorial, were 1,244 faces. The crew members of the Unbroken and her escort wing who had not come home. Their names scrolled slowly beneath their images. It took 11 minutes for all of them to pass. No one in the hall spoke during those 11 minutes. High Arbiter the Los Vereen descended from his hovering platform to stand on the stage, something the Silver Elder had not done in 40 years of service, always conducting Accord business from elevation as was Sarthi tradition. He stood at human height. He stood among them. The Vreth Dominion, he said, his translated voice carried to every corner of the hall and every receiver across the relay network, has retreated beyond the outer veil. Predictive analysis suggests they will not return for a minimum of 2,000 standard cycles, if at all. The civilizations of the Galactic Accord are safe. He paused, looked at Yara. Because 23 ships chose to stand. He reached into his robes and withdrew something that had not been seen in 4,000 years. The seal of the Accord, a physical artifact, palm-sized, made of materials that predated most member civilizations, that glowed with a deep, pulsing golden light. The seal of the Accord, Vereen said, was last granted in the Third Expansion Era, to the Lorith Conclave, for acts of collective courage that preserved galactic stability. It is not a medal. It is not a commendation. It is a formal declaration that a civilization's actions have altered the course of galactic history in service of the many. He extended the seal toward Yara. On behalf of the 312 civilizations of the Galactic Accord, and by unanimous vote, the first in recorded Accord history, this seal is granted to the Terran Interstellar Directorate. To humanity. Yara Ose stepped forward. She accepted the seal with both hands. She looked at it for a moment, this ancient, glowing thing that had been carried carefully for 4 millennia waiting for a moment worthy of it. Then she looked up at the hall. At 300 civilizations. At the memorial faces of 1,244 crew members behind her. We didn't do it for the honor, she said. The translation matrices carried her words perfectly, but she suspected the tone translated on its own. We did it because it needed to be done and we were here. She held up the seal. But we'll accept this on behalf of every crew member who didn't make it home. They deserve to be remembered. In the hall, something began that had never been recorded in 10,000 years of Accord proceedings. It started with Alanthos of the Sarthi delegation, one pair of his 6 limbs coming together in a slow rhythmic impact. Then Darren beside him. Then the Eutheri block. Then the Kelvari whose skin flooded brilliant gold. Then delegation by delegation, section by section, species by species. A wave of sound that was different in every culture but identical in meaning. It was applause. 300 civilizations each expressing it differently, all meaning the same thing. We see you. We are grateful. We will remember. Yara stood on that stage holding an artifact older than her civilization, with a ship behind her that was barely functional and a crew beside her that was barely standing, and she did the most human thing possible. She smiled. Later, in a private session, Ambassador Sirith of the Kelvari, who had spent 62 cycles cataloging what he called the human anomaly in his diplomatic reports, approached Yara in the corridor outside the hall. His skin was a warm, thoughtful amber. Commander Ose, I have studied your species extensively. I believed I understood you. May I ask you something that has puzzled me since the emergency session? Sure, Yara said. When High Arbiter Vereen told you the casualty projection was 60 to 90%, when you knew what you were volunteering for, what made you say yes? What was the calculation? Yara considered the question seriously. There wasn't one, she said. There was just a hall full of people who were scared, and a problem that needed solving and us being there. She shrugged. We're not brave because we're not afraid. We're terrified same as anyone. We just decided that being afraid isn't a good enough reason not to act. Siritha's amber deepened to something warm and unnameable. In 4,000 years of Accord records, he said quietly, no species has ever been described that way before. Yara patted his nearest arm, a gesture that would have been deeply presumptuous between 2 Kelvari but that Sirith had quietly come to understand as a distinctly human expression of warmth. Give us a few thousand years, she said. We're just getting started.